Welcome to Jim White's webinar series. Jim has been investing, coaching executives, and turning around companies for over 30 years. Now your host, Dr. Jim White.
Hello, this is Jim White. It is May the 12th, 2020, and welcome to my Critical Thinking webinar. You're most likely saying right now, when you hear that word critical thinking, why should I care about critical thinking at this time? As I was preparing for the session this evening, I kept asking myself that question over and over and over. And in my opinion, we should care because we need to know how to determine facts that will help us make good decisions during this time in our life, and especially during this pandemic, this COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. We'll also be going to the polls in some fashion to elect a new president and other political leaders here in the fall. We're facing massive unemployment. We're facing business failures. We're facing a new way to live day to day. We're facing new careers. You may need to make a decision about a new business. Just to mention a few good reasons to learn critical thinking skills. I'm going to do my very best this evening to take a very complex subject and put it in a fashion that we can all understand and be able to use. As I've shared many times in past sessions, my objective in doing these webinars is to give you tools that you can use right now. You can use in your personal life and in your business that will help you move forward to your goals and objectives. My critical thinking skills series, as I call it, to do a complete series is going to take about 12 sessions. I'm not suggesting that we're going to do all 12 in a row, but between now and September, I am going to do 12 sessions dealing with critical thinking. And each time we do a session, we'll recap the previous session and we will keep moving because this is a very, very, very important subject. I am committed to the time provided that you are open to taking the journey with me as we go through these weeks to come. Now, what I'd like to do is to reflect on the following. We live in a knowledge-based society, and the more critical you think, the better your knowledge will be. Critical thinking provides you with the skills to analyze and to evaluate information so that you are able to obtain the greatest amount of knowledge from it. It provides the best chance of making the correct decision and minimizes damages if a mistake does occur. Critical thinking will lead to being a more rational and disciplined thinker. It will reduce your prejudice and bias, which will provide you a better understanding of your environment. This series will provide you the skills to evaluate, identify, and distinguish between what I call real information and information that's not real. I'm wordsmithing that a little bit. Distinguish between relevant information and irrelevant information. It will lead you to be more productive in your career and provide a great skill in your everyday life to help make decisions such as we just discussed above. Again, we're going to the polls in November to elect a president and other political leaders. You're seeing the news on a daily basis and you're trying to determine what is fact and what is fiction. Trying to determine what to believe so you can make the best decision for you and your family and your businesses. The objective for this series are as follows: is to understand the components of critical thinking, utilize non-linear thinking, use logical thinking, recognize what it means to be a critical thinker, evaluate information using critical thinking skills. Evaluate information using critical thinking skills. Identify the benefits of critical thinking. Revise perspective when necessary. Comprehend problem-solving abilities. Critical thinking is akin to the study of logic. Critical thinking relates to how we make decisions and use our judgment. That's so important, I'm going to repeat it. Critical thinking relates to how we make decisions and use our critical judgment. Critical thinking is more than just thinking about thinking, right? It's just more than just thinking about thinking or metacognition. It is also about how we take action. Critical thinking involves many components, and we will address a number of unique components in this session this evening. And let's start with this. Start here. Start with applying reason. The ability to reason is often considered one of the characteristic marks of being human. An individual's ability to reason well is a critical thinking skill. Many of the definitions of critical thinking tend to focus on the ability to reason. So as we've talked, I keep going back to, we're going to the polls in some fashion in the fall. We're going to be hearing all types of information between now and November. We're hearing all types of information about COVID-19. We're hearing all types of information about a vaccine, when it will or when it will not. We will hear all types of information from many people in the race to develop the vaccine, which, in my opinion, until there is a proven vaccine, we're always going to be in harm's way with this nasty virus. So once again, when you read, when you hear, you've got to have skills to be able to sort through what's real and what's not real. So again, that is one of my reasons that I decided I will tackle this very complex subject matter via a webcast. And I hope that we can pull it off, and together we will. Reasoning occurs when we use our knowledge of one thing. I'm going to slow down when I say these because I want it to just resonate, not suggestion that you can't take in everything I'm saying as fast as I'm saying it, but it's so important to allow the words to sit with you, right? To take them in. So once again, reasoning occurs when we use our knowledge of one thing, process, or statement to determine if another thing, process, or statement is true, right? Hi, boys, jumped up there. I don't know about you, but as I was looking at this morning, I shower, and I'm going to look like I did in the 70s if I don't figure a way to get a haircut here soon. So I'm just looking at it. It's just like jumping all over the place. So as one of the pleasures of life is being able to get a haircut, right? Go out to the salon. So maybe soon. So sidebar there. So when we apply reasoning, we use logic to determine what follows what, right? When we are applying reasoning, we use logic to determine what follows what. So when you are listening to news clips and when you are reading your favorite news feed, that we normally take all this information in, And you're still probably saying, Jim, why should I care about this? And what am I going to be able to pick up? Well, if you just pick up one thing from this information, then I'm going to be very happy. But I think we can pick up more. So once again, it's about critical thinking, so it can help you make decisions. And you're saying, Jim, I've been making decisions all my life, and I've done pretty well up to this point in time. I'm sure you have. And I want you to continue to do that. So once again, if I can give you some tools or new tools or tools that are a refresher to you, great. That's great. But human reasoning does not always follow logic. Human reasoning does not always follow logic and is often based on emotional bias, right? We all know that to be true. How many times have we do it? We make a decision, we size it up, we make a decision right now based on an emotional bias, right? There are many types of reasoning. Now, I'm going to examine 6 major terms associated with reasoning, right? Now, this is 6 major terms associated with reasoning. And they're going to be somewhat clinical here, so bear with me. And these 6 terms, one is called inductive, deductive, syllogism, and that is spelled Syllogism. I can spell it better than I can say it with the Southern tongue. The next one is linear ordering, probability, and if-then statements, right? Now, reasoning has 2 forms, deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, which you're very familiar with, is when we use our prior knowledge of 2 or more premises to infer a valid conclusion. With inductive reasoning, we gather data or make observations that lead to a hypothesis or conclusion, much like the scientific method. Now, inductive uses observations lead to conclusion. Inductive, lead to conclusion. Deductive uses stated premises to infer a valid conclusion. Syllogism uses 2 or more premises to derive a valid conclusion. For example, probably give a better example there because that's a tongue twister. Example of that is when you say a fire produces smoke, there is smoke coming from the house, right? There is a fire in the house. So those are the type of things when we're talking about 2 or more premises to derive a valid conclusion. Linear ordering involves interference of orderly relationships among a single dimension, i.e. size or quantity or position. Probability uses information to determine if the conclusion is probable or is not true. If then statements uses contingency statements that if is true, then the consequence must also be true. Now that was a mouthful, and I realize that, and you're probably going to have to go back and listen to this a couple of times. That was a mouthful, very clinical, and one of the other things that I was determined when I was thinking about doing this series is how to do it without putting you to sleep. So it was necessary to get through those 6 major factors for you to have some context. If I didn't do it, and then a lot of my psychology friends would say, Jim, you left out the most important meat. Now I realize that we don't walk around using these terms in our everyday life, but there's a reason behind those terms. And if you're looking to make better decisions and to be able to critical think, and these terms are there for you to go study and understand exactly how they will help you. Now, so And then as you are going back and listening to this session to understand a little bit more of what I just said, once you conclude that, a good exercise to do is that, when was the last time I used any of these types? These are types of reasoning. Now that's the difference. They're types of reasoning. Reason that's so important. Now, much of the reasoning we do in everyday life is of the probability sort. That's what majority of us do. Think about when we get up in the morning and decide what to wear or what we're going to do with our hair, as we talk about, especially if you haven't had a haircut, right? We do so based on the weather. We maybe go check the weather. We often check the forecast and to see what the probability is for rain, snow, or sunshine, right? You probably did that today. So why is probability often used in real life? What can affect probabilities? There's variables and goals, right, and probabilities. Now, the next thing that is involved in critical thinking is one of my favorite of the many that we'll be discussing over time, and that is called open-mindedness. So let's take a look at that. Take a look at open-mindedness. Open-mindedness is the virtue by which we learn. And all of these sessions, the workshops, coaching, staff meetings, and ground rules that I always lay out in my sessions is to have an open mind. And mind's like a parachute. If it's closed, you're going to crash and burn, right? So have an open mind. That is so easily said and rolls off the tongue so easily, but sometimes it is so challenging for us to open our mind. Why? Because of our built-in biases that we have. And we just stop learning. Unfortunately, this little thing up here, we only use just a little bit of it. And we've got a lot of it to use and a lot of it to expand, right? So have an open mind. Being open means taking into account all the evidence that's in front of you, listening to, I'm going to use the word arguments, to revise a current understanding. It means being critically open to alternatives. Wow. It means being critically open to alternatives. Our mind just gets shut down. I know I'm guilty. I'm guilty. There's no question about it. Willing to think about other possibilities, even after having formed an opinion, is a big deal. I think a lot of you that are watching this, or maybe watching a replay, have either attended or heard of Jim White's red carpet tour. I use movies in a lot of cases. Just fantastic. I've been doing it for years, and I really miss it. I use movies to be able to show it on the screen and watch events play out. And one of the movies that I use that actually goes to this point is the movie called 12 Angry Men with Henry Fonda. If you've never seen it, I would encourage you to go look at it, and especially watch Henry Fonda as he goes about, as it's a jury setting. I won't give the whole story away, but he goes about working and ultimately changing people's mind on the subject. So then, after having formed an opinion and not allowing preconceived notions to constrain or inhibit reflections on newly presented information, right? Newly presented information. Open-minded inquiry is a central theme to education, right? So we've gone through two components of critical thinking skills, and there's many of them, and I struggled on the say where to lay all of them out front to let you know what to write, and I decided against it, because if I did that, that would have took most of the time we had tonight. So we're going to go through them at a time, and like I said, as we go to the next session, I'll go back and recap them. And then one of the things that we will do once it's all said and done, we will make some white paper available to you should you want it. So the next thing we're going to look at or talk about in the time we have remaining is this. Analysis is a critical thinking skill as well, analysis. And critical thinking, the step of analysis helps us to discern and access information. Learning occurs in three domains. Learning occurs in three domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In the cognitive domain, analysis involves the process of discerning or separating. It gives us the ability to break down the complexity of an idea or an item, and it allows us to gain a better understanding. The next thing that we're going to discuss, I'm going through these quite rapidly because I wanted to get them out there with the time, because I want to schedule about 30 minutes. That's about all we can take of this. You probably said enough already, Jim. But anyway, bear with me. Logic. Logic and reasoning are similar, but not the same. Kind of like a paradox, right? Logic is the branch of philosophy that gives the rules for a deriving and valid, deriving out a valid conclusion, if I can talk this evening. A conclusion is valid if it follows from statements that are accepted as fact. Now, what you're reading, what you're seeing, how much information has been given today that we know is false, but presented as fact? That's the reason, one of the reasons I decided to take on this massive monster of critical thinking in this venue, because you can tell now it's complex. But again, I hope we can pick something out of it, pick up a few pieces, because why? Because I am concerned. I am concerned about what we got, 20, 30 million people unemployed. I am concerned about the direction of our country's going. I am concerned about the direction of not only, I'm just going to call all of our political structures. I'm concerned. I am concerned. So we as American citizens, we have, in my view, have a responsibility to be able to, I'm going to say, get in the game, if you will. And the biggest way for us to get into the game is go to the polling place, whatever that may look like. And over these months to come, try to sift through what you believe is right or wrong, and what you believe is the best use of my particular vote. One of the things that we have to decide, well, we, in my opinion, need to get us back on the right course. Now, of course, I will get a lot of feedback on this. A lot of people say, well, there's nothing wrong with the course we're on, Jim. So we have this part of the population. And I hope that we can all take a step back and start analyzing and start asking questions. Is it good for the country? Is it good for my family? Is it good for my career? Is it good for my business? Is it good? So logic is the branch of rules, deriving valid conclusions. And so a conclusion is valid if it follows from statements that are accepted as fact. Now, a simple example of that, logic. 1 and 1 is 2, right? Well, I don't think many people are going to fight with that, right? So that's what we're talking about, logic. This is a rule based in fact. We have got to think and discern the information determine what's fact, what's factual. Factual statements are called premises. When reasoning does not follow the rules, we say it's illogical. Now, currently, in the United States, we could probably, half the population will say the other half is illogical, right? So that's what makes our country such a beautiful, wonderful place to live in, that we have the opportunity. I have the opportunity to sit here and share what is fact. This is not, Jim, this is fact. This is some study. This is information, and this is the way our brain works. This is fact. Now, as we move into next week, we're going to, assuming you say, Jim, no more. If you say that, I will honor it. But I hope you don't say that, because we get some rhythm here. We'll be able to drill down on this, because it's more about giving you some tools or reinforcing some tools that's going to help us as American citizens to make better decisions. Critical thinking. Now, as we continue, and if we go into next week, which on the same topic, I will pick up on what I call non-linear thinking, and we'll talk about that. This is also called linear or vertical thinking. We'll talk about all of that, and we'll talk about much more. And then we'll talk about stepping out of your comfort zone. That's one of the first steps in developing linear thinking. And we will drill down on all of that. So I hope in some way, you have been able to take away at least the premise of critical thinking. And like I said, realizing that there was some very dry content to a degree. But I just want you to, as we conclude this evening, I want you to think about, wow, there's a way to maybe sit back and open my mind, and a methodology for me to analyze the information that's been given me, that's been fed to me, and for me to be able to make some critical decisions. Then that's going to help you, your career, your family, your business, and foremost, our country. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and give us some feedback on this. Before we go, we are getting some questions, and thank you for that. And I'll do my best to answer them. We had a lot of inquiries, and I have to confess, a lot of them I can't determine for your folks, and you know who you are that presented these questions. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we'll talk about it offline, what you were trying to ask us. And then there's other questions. Where can we get I think the question was, let me read it. Is there a manual for that? So that's the one I can read. And I said, yeah, it is. My book, opportunityinvesting.com. So that's the best manual that I can get. I'm biased, right? I'm prejudiced on that. So again, I want to thank everyone for sharing your time with us. I want to thank you for your interest, and I want to thank you for you. And I want to say, please be safe. And until next time, have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you for your participation and interest in Jim White's webinar series. To stay in touch with Jim, go to www.authorjimwhite.com.